What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy Darry. I'm back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about combat sports, from MMA to boxing, violence. Is it wrong? Is it sin? Does God condemn these things? Is it wise to do these things? All that we're going to get into. I got my friend Erick Correa joining me. We're going to dive into this thing right now here on The Weird Perspective. Let's go. All right, man. Today I got a special guest. The brother sitting with me, his name is Erick Correa. I've grown to learn a lot about this brother. I love his heart and for everything that he's doing. And I wanted to have him on the channel today because, as you guys can see, the man has some belts behind him. The man has a history of being in an MMA. And so me and my curious self wanted to take the opportunity to hear his heart and hear his perspective on being in an MMA and being a Christian. Now, I don't know if he was a Christian before, during that time, or if he became a Christian after, but we're going to get into it. And so welcome to the channel today, Mr. Erick Correa. How are you doing, brother?
Yeah, man, I'm doing great, man. It's a good season, busy season, but all kind of good busy.
Amen, yeah. Amen. How's the family? Everybody's good?
Yeah, family's doing good. Wife went back to work 2 weeks ago. We got the early start with CPS. So she's a teacher, Lakeview High School on the Northwest Side. You're familiar with.
Wow, Wildcats.
Yeah, yep. And then my two little ones are back in school as well. So yeah, it's our first week doing all of that. So just making sure that they're on the right bus routes and the timing and all that. Yeah, no season of transition, but all in all, it's good, man. It's a blessing.
Hey, man, that's cool. I'm in the same boat. My kids are back in school after homeschooling them for 2 years. They act like they ain't missed a beat. We dropped them off yesterday, and then they came home and they were acting like just brand new. Like, we've been in school all the time. They're friends. They were running around. I was trying to give them hugs and kisses. They were like, all right, daddy, move. Like, brushing me off. I was like, that's what we doing? So I had to embarrass them a little bit. So my middle child, I was like, give me some smooches real loud. She's like, no, daddy, stop. But yeah, it's been fun, man. It's just the joy of seeing them being actually excited to be back in school and be with their friends. And so, I got an 8th grader. I got a 6th grader. I got a 5th grader and a 3rd grader. So, Lord, give me an extra dose of some patience and some grace.
Yeah,
I deal with all this stuff. So, but yeah, man, I wanted you to share your story, your upbringing, how you came to faith. Just let the watchers know about you and who you are.
Yeah, man. So, born in 1981, northwest side of Chicago. Belmont Craig neighborhood, born and bred, raised, pretty much all my whole life. Born to a fully Puerto Rican family. Mom's Puerto Rican, dad's Puerto Rican, and both born in Puerto Rico, but both moved to Chicago at a young age. So I guess I'm what you would consider that I think it's like a 3/4 generation Puerto Rican in the city, basically, where it's kind of like so in my household, my parents. My parents their first language was both Spanish, but in our home, our first language was English. So it's kind of like, aunts, uncles, cousins, a lot of them spoke Spanish. So like for me, I wouldn't consider myself fully bilingual, although I understand Spanish. I don't speak it very fluently. I can carry minimal conversation, but it's one of those things where it's like, my grandma speaks to me in Spanish, I speak to her in English, but we are communicating well together. So that's kind of the situation. Grew up in a Catholic family, where it's kind of like, church every Sunday, mass every Sunday, kind of to check that box, weekly. But also I went to a Catholic school, growing up as well. So it was also, we had to be there to pay our, our parishioner, I forgot what they call it, so that we can kind of like reduce our tuition and whatnot. One full brother, half sister. I didn't grow up with. My brother, obviously, we grew up together in the same household. But man, for the most part, a generally speaking healthy family. Obviously we had our issues like a lot of families do. Yeah, so I would say this: my dad was really, really hardworking. He worked as a CTA, but he lost his dad when he was young, 12 years old. He was one of of five people in the household, for three older sisters and his mom. So he pretty much, pretty early on, had to work, right? And so in that day and age, he had to work, pretty early. So he didn't graduate high school, but he started working for the CTA, worked for the CTA for a bunch of years, actually retired with the CTA because he had heart conditions, and he actually had a heart attack on his way on his bus route, stepped off of the bus into the hospital so that they can perform surgery. Like, it was like that. Yeah. So, but man, he just worked super, super hard. My mom also, high school, later on in her years when I was a kid, she went back to college, finished business school, and also worked. So both my parents were working. My dad he worked regular job, then he worked overtime. He owned a video production company called Precious Moments Video Production. And so now, back in the 90s, when not everyone had access, and technology wasn't at the point where anybody can become a videographer or, a media specialist. So back in those days, you hired a videographer to come and do your wedding or your cotillion or, all that type of thing. So he owned that company. So for years, it was like driving the bus 5 days a week, working 50 hours. And then on the weekends, he was, shooting videos and all that. So dad wasn't home very much, not for bad reasons, but for good reasons, that he was working. So for as much as I remember being a kid, our quality time, our family was on vacation. Those were the things we did. Played a lot of sports when I was younger, played baseball since I was 7 years old. Baseball, football, at some point, like in my older years, kind of became more my priority. But man, just an athlete my entire life. Man, trying to think what else is key. So although I was a Catholic, I wouldn't say I grew up really having a solid faith in Jesus. That came later, around the time of, about the time that I graduated college, about the time I graduated high school, going into college, went to SIU, but really had a hard time there. My parents divorced that very year. And in that year, just the foundations of my life kind of started to crumble around me. But really in that time, I was really into music, and I don't know if we're gonna get into that, but I was really into doing music and all that. So it was kind of like
reggaeton.
No, bro, reggaeton was moving the team. But yeah, so it was like, pursuing music was I was literally trying to pursue a music career at the time. While I was going to college, it's like, what do I do? And then I also went to college for football. So in that first semester, it was just a big mess. Super depressed. Came back to the city. And within that year's time of coming back to the city, I ended up becoming a fitness director at a health club. Because I wanted to do, if it wasn't music, then I wanted to do personal training and coaching. Became a fitness director at a health club. And I hired a boxing coach to kind of come in and help my personal training numbers. So, personal training sales numbers. That coach ultimately helped me scratch the itch of athletics, because I was past playing football because of injuries and all that.
What position did you play in football?
Football depends on what point in life. I went into high school playing defensive end, in large part because my freshman year in high school, I graduated 8th grade, 6 foot 240, benching 240. So you think that this guy's going to end up being, keep growing into like some 6'5" monster. Actually, I stopped growing. So beyond freshman year, I didn't grow anymore. By the time I was a sophomore, I was playing fullback and inside linebacker. And by the time I had finished, I was playing, inside linebacker and transitioning to DB. So
okay,
it was a transition point. So yeah, But at that point, when I was working as a fitness director in Bally's, I hired this boxing coach to work for me to boost the personal training numbers. That boxing coach I started to do life with, and it was in a season of my life where, again, mom and dad had already moved to Florida. Me and my brother, we were, young men. I was, 19 years old at the time, trying to figure it out. Just the two of us, as bachelors, if you will, holding it down. And it was in a season of life that I was in tons of sin and kind of trying to figure it out. It was also a time of 9/11 where the towers just months prior had hit. And so this guy's boxing coach and I just spent a lot of time together. So, and he asked me to work out with him one day. And see, as personal trainers, when we say you want to work out with me, it's not like, hey, come alongside me so we can have a good time and, grow as fitness pals. It's like, no, you're going to work out with me. I'm challenging you to my workout and see if you can make it through. That's kind of more the situation. And it was boxing. It was my first time boxing. It was a grueling 2-hour workout. He thought that I had a lot of potential, a lot of talent. And then so he essentially became my boxing coach and started training me. 3 months later, I fought in my first Golden Gloves, and and 3 fights later, I was a Golden Glove champion.
Wow, just 3 months?
3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, started training me in so started training me November of that year. The Golden Gloves began. Well, I'm sorry, 4 months. February began. I signed up for the Golden Gloves, and then that Golden Gloves is about a month. So beginning April, I was a Golden Glove champion. But also, what happened in that time is he led me to Jesus. Led me to Jesus. I had a lot of it was a season in my life where I was just tripping. I would go to sleep every night, just kind of thinking, man, bro, they're gonna come get us. They got the twin tower, they got the towers, they're gonna start sending nukes. What's gonna happen? And it wasn't like I was consciously thinking about it, but in my subconscious, I was. I was worried, definitely worried. I would go to sleep every night in that season, kind of having a different dream about like how's the world gonna end, and what's gonna happen. And every single night it was a night terror. I'd wake up in sweats. And it was funny because this guy, we're meeting in the health club one night, and at the end of the night, so my shift would end at 8 p.m. for managing. And then I would start my boxing training because we were in the health club. That's where our boxing gym was. So now for 2 hours I'm training. Now the end of the workout comes around and we're sitting in the office, and he says, "You're tired today, man. What's going on?" And I'm just, man, I just haven't slept well. So, well, tell me what's going on. And I'm just kind of look, I've been having night terrors, all this stuff, and I just kind of start unloading, like just stressing out about the world ending and all this and this and that. He's like, "Tell me about your dream." And I was like, man, so look, I go to sleep and I'm like, I go to sleep fine. And then the world keeps ending in different ways, warfare, nukes exploding, all this other stuff. And just be a different kind every night. And I tell him, I'm like, and I'm waking up, I was like, bro, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where I'm going to go. He's like, well, yeah, let's talk about that. Where do you think you'll go? And I'm like, okay, we're talking that religion conversation. Like, okay, I grew up, I was raised as a Catholic. I, for the most part, believe everything that they taught me in school. But I have a whole bunch of reservations about, like, look, in the Catholic school, they're teaching me evolution. At the same time, they're teaching me that God created everything. So how does that all work and how does it pan out? And I'm like, it seems like all the religions in the world kind of have the same story. All the religions talk about a flood. All the religions talk about, all this, but so they all seem to have a path. And then he said, okay, so you have to pick one. Who would you pick? I said, if I had to pick one, I'd pick Jesus. So, okay. Well, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. The crazy thing was it didn't take any debate, conversation, or argument beyond that. It was like in that moment that I heard it, I knew it was true. And in that moment, it was like scales falling from my eyes. And I just remember feeling like my spiritual eyes are open, because I had talked to, Christians in the past. I had been invited to youth groups and all these other things. But the funny thing is, no one ever actually quoted me that verse of what Jesus said. So it was like now looking back that I know, it's like, man, the word of God literally opened my eyes that day. Not literally, figuratively. Opened my eyes that day. and then man, West. So that just began, that it wasn't like rainbows and Skittles after that. It was, oh snap, then I'm in a lot of trouble if this is true, because I've been in sin, and because I'm a womanizer, and because I've been sleeping with multiple women, and I'm after my own glory with music, and I'm all these other things, and I'm just like, whoa. And we talked all night, man. And I just had all kind of questions about, well, if that's true, then what about this? And if that's true, what about this? And what about that? And isn't the world supposed to end soon? How does what happened with the towers fit into all this, man? And so it's funny because I'll never forget that night. You hear, so when Health Club, now gyms are 24 hours, but then we closed at 11. And about at 10:45, I'll never forget, there's a voice from the PA saying, hey, look, it's 10:45, the gym floors are now closing, make your way towards the exit, so on and so forth. And we're talking, before you know it, I hear the treadmills turn on again. And we had stayed there all night until the next morning, and people are back at the gym.
Wow. What time did the gym open?
6 a.m. Yeah.
Son.
And honestly, we were there probably about 8. I remember jumping in my car, driving home, freaking out, crying to God, asking him to save me, crying to Jesus, asking him to save me on my way home. And at that point, I'm really tired. So I get home and I have another dream. I go home and I sleep again. And sure enough, I had another dream that morning. And it was the world ending. And this time it was really, really crazy because it was like in that dream, I heard a loud explosion, and it was like the light rose to the top, and I didn't know, is this the sun? What is this? And I felt a cool liquid cover my body, and the voice say, now you're going to fight for me. Couldn't make much sense of it at the time, but I was just like, whoa, that's different. But I mean, we know what that was.
Yeah. That's an amazing testimony, bro. Amazing testimony. And so speaking of you fighting for him, what's going on with those belts behind you? What's those belts? Are those boxing belts or UFC belts? I mean, MMA belts.
So the belts, these are boxing belts. These are Golden Gloves championship belts. So when you fight the Golden Gloves, you're, depending your level, the first, your first 9 fights or so on the Golden Gloves in the amateurs, they call it the novice division. So if you win the novice division, you win a trophy, right? But either your 10th, if you fought 9 fights, then they put you in what's called the open division, or if you've won a championship, they move you to the open division, which is basically the advanced amateur division, where that's more the official amateur division, where if you win tournaments, it goes towards your national ranking, and ultimately you can start working your way towards the Olympics. So these are my open division belts. So I won these in the open division.
Nice.
So, and then these are just some other random tournaments, and I have a couple others that I didn't put up, but these are kind of the more prestigious. So, and then right here behind me, I did MMA. I only had a 6-fight MMA career, but I did. You could say my first 4 fights or so was kind of fast tracking through MMA, because MMA is a little bit different. In MMA, if you got good hands or feet, and if you're exciting, you can work your way to the top faster in MMA. If they recognize the excitement level, right? You become a prospect. So in 2012, I was the Illinois Prospect of the Year, kind of working my way up. And then I fought for Bellator for a year. And so those are my Bellator gloves. And Bellator is kind of like, you can say the second major league organization for fighting. And I did sign for Bellator for a year.
That's where who left MMA? The woman, what's her name? Cyborg. I don't know her real name, but isn't she with Bellator now?
Cyborg. I don't know if she's with Bellator or World Series. But a lot of UFC guys went over to Bellator. Rampage, Rampage, Bonner, Bader, Tito Ortiz. Some Hall of Famers have made their transition or have gone over to Bellator. Fedor Emelianenko, greatest heavyweight of all time, most believe, made their way over.
Cool. So what's the time frame from you boxing until and then what made you want to switch over to MMA?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. So I started boxing in 2001 as an amateur. When I first started boxing, it was started boxing in 01, but at the same time, I was a personal trainer, and by nature, I'm a coach, and you know, I would say got some leadership qualities. So I was in Chicago, the only guy who was really boxing and coaching at the same time, in large part because vocationally, I was a personal trainer, right? So when I started training in 2000, I started fighting in 2001, started training in 2003 while still coaching. And in 2004, that coach, myself and my brother, we actually opened a boxing gym on the Northwest side called Cornerstone Gym. We had it for 3 years. And we coached a team out of there. And so through that whole time, I was boxing as a competitive amateur boxer and coaching and training. And honestly, the whole point behind opening the gym was so that it would be a ministry vehicle to reach people. And so, you know, to minister to people. And boxing does that, man, bro, like nothing else, man. So, I mean, that's how I came to faith. That's how I came to faith. And that's how we started to like minister to a lot of other people, brought people to the faith as well. That first church that I was a part of was really birthed in that health club, because as soon as I came to the faith, I started preaching to everybody, bro. And so some friends became enemies, but a lot of like clients and coworkers actually came to the faith. A good friend of mine, Mike G, known as Mike the Realtor, he's actually the guy that when we were at the health club made the announcement that night about the gym closing over the PA system. He became a co-pastor of mine with me, alongside with me, 8 years later at the house church that we're a part of. So it's just kind of tripped out full circle how God does things, man. But I don't even know if I answered the question. Oh, so yeah. So boxing became my my recreational thing. It became my vocational arena, and it became also my ministry vehicle. You know, it's holistic life on life, right? As we talk about it, and so it was like it's kind of what I was talking to you before we got on, was just like, the Lord taught me pretty early on that like the way that most people compartmentalize, I think a lot of times can affect where we are in life. Because like, man, the scripture says that God has established the boundaries of your dwelling places, right? So that those around, I'm paraphrasing now, but those around you might feel their way towards him, right? And so I take that really seriously. And I praise God that that was the way that I came to faith, right? And so anyways, so it was all that. And then up into the year, so we got 2004, we opened the gym. And in that time, I was pursuing gold medal. I was trying to make the Olympic team. That was my, that was what I was really after. So I became nationally ranked in 2006. I placed, I won a bronze at the National Golden Gloves tournament, the Tournament of Champions. I lost to Michael Hunter, the guy who eventually became the U.S. representative in the Olympics that year. He's the only heavyweight to represent the United States twice in the Olympics. And I barely lost to him. I found out after the fact I was beating him on the cards. That's a whole nother story. Before I ended up going down with a rib issue. And that's a whole lesson learned in life. But yeah, so I was pursuing that all the way up until I was trying to make the 2008 games. I ended up losing in the semifinals. So basically placed tied for third in the nation at that point. And just missed the Olympic team. But man, got married that year, and ultimately that year thought to myself, this isn't doing it anymore. I need to, my hope was that making the Olympics team would give me a platform again, because we had to close the gym in 2006, but that it would give me a platform again to give myself enough credibility after the Olympics that I can come back and maybe continue fighting or open a gym again with, Olympian Erick Correa, right? To kind of help my resume. And so it would help the business side of things when I came back. Not making the team affected that. I ended up going back to the health club. So we opened the gym for 3 years, went back to the health club. It was Bally's that I worked at, and started managing there again. And in that time, I thought fighting was over, but I picked it up again a year later, and then started to make a transition to MMA. So I trained in MMA for the next few years and ultimately transitioned fully in MMA into MMA in 2012, when I had my debut fight.
Okay. What style of MMA do you have? I know it's mixed martial arts, so it's a lot of mixing, but what's your predominantly skill set, or what
yeah,
think of the right
you're
word.
asking like what's my base art? My base art is
what's your base art?
Yeah, it's definitely boxing. I'm a stand-up guy. I wrestled a little bit in high school, so obviously in football kind of helps a little bit with that. The guy who taught me, my boxing coach, wasn't just a boxer. He taught Jeet Kune Do, and Jeet Kune Do is kind of Bruce Lee's philosophy to martial arts, way of the intercepting fist. It's really the kind of like the precursor to what mixed martial arts ended up becoming. So when I learned under him, I've learned a plethora of arts, but boxing was what I competed in. So when when it got to the points where I was going to make the transition, I had somewhat of a kickboxing base behind some Muay Thai, some Dutch style. But if you had to ask me specifically, it was, boxing's my base. But yeah, I trained out of Curran's martial arts in Curran's MMA under Jeff Curran, which Curran, has his black belt under Pedro Saur, which is a cousin of the Gracies. So when we made the transition to Jits, it was a super legit, Brazilian jiu-jitsu background as well. So I trained under him. I ended up training under Curran's for ultimately it came down to another 7 years of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But if you had to, my base is boxing.
Nice. So with all of those things being said, that's an amazing testimony and story, man, of all those things. I'm just like super. I have so many questions, but I want to stay on topic. Obviously, you're gonna have kind of I won't say bias, but your perspective is going to be different than a lot of people that I talk to on what is your opinion of the morality of combat sports?
Yes. So you're saying from a faith perspective, right? I mean, that's what we're
from a faith.
Yeah, that's a great question. In that time frame between boxing and there was a period of time where I actually pastored a church here in Chicago for 10 years. And in that season had to deal with this quite a bit, because it's like, how can you pastor and punch people in the face, right? That's what we're asking.
Right.
Yeah. And to that point, man, I think, so I first have to start off by, it's not for everybody, that's the first thing. The second thing I have to say is, there's, I believe the Bible is very clear that there are certain things that are sin for everybody, right? When you look at the 10 Commandments, those are clearly sin, right? So thou commit adultery means I should not engage with another woman who is not my wife, right? And then there's many levels there, right? Like, should not engage physically, should not engage sexually, should not engage emotionally. Like the whole idea of not committing adultery is like, no, love your wife well. And in loving your wife well and holding yourself only to her,
right,
you will not engage with anyone else, right? And so like that's clear, right? So it's not like for one man it's sin, and for another man, for all of these other miscellaneous reasons, it's okay. No, that's very clear. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not, right? So we know that. But I think there's other things in scripture that is very clear. I mean, especially if you look at Romans, like there were some people who ate certain things and some people who abstained. There were certain people who celebrated one day above another, and certain people who celebrated all as they're the same, right? And so
Romans 14.
Yeah, Romans chapter 14. And there it's kind of, there's some clarity there where it's like, let the person who abstains with joy, right? And let the person who observe with joy, and you partakes in food eating and abstains from eating, right? And the whole idea is that like, the whole idea is that like, it says something to the effect of it, it's like there's one Lord who's Lord over all, right? However, if in your eating you cause someone to stumble, it's better to abstain than to lose your brother, right?
Right.
Or it's better to partake and so forth, right? So I think as believers, it's important to be conscious of all those things. There's one other interesting thing about Romans where it says he actually refers to the one as stronger than the other who is weaker, right? So there's this faith component, right? Wherein that the scripture says that let anything be that's done, let it be done by faith, right? And this is the only way to honor God, right? That all things be done in faith. So there's clearly a lot of things there. And I've just not yet found the scripture that says fighting for sport is sin.
Yeah, me neither. I was really looking for it because I was going to bring it up, and I was like, I can't find anything. Like I talked to a couple other people who are Christians who train at gyms right now, and I couldn't find anything that's directly like black and white, like don't fight. You know what I'm saying? Like there is anything, and then it goes back to like Romans 14, where and I do think that there is a level of like maturity that has to take place, obviously, for you to be able to engage in some of these things and talk about some of these topics, like even alcohol and stuff like that. And so, I couldn't find any verses neither, bro.
I mean, and the interesting thing is that with alcohol, there are scriptures, but even then, there's nuances, right? Look, let's talk about alcohol for a second. God has blessed me to disdain the taste of alcohol. And I'll say he's blessed me for that. Someone else would say he's blessed them with taste buds for alcohol. And I'll be like, okay, but don't get drunk. Because there is scripture that clearly speaks of drunkenness being sin, right?
Right.
So there's specific scriptures in regards to that. However, you've been given the taste buds for alcohol. Sometimes, socially speaking, I'll be around my friends and they'll be drinking and I'll think to myself, this shot that you're giving me is really going to not be pleasant for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I partake in the shot, it doesn't make it sin for me. Because I guarantee you I won't get drunk. And God's blessed me with taste buds to disdain it so that I won't get drunk. And maybe God did that to protect me. Who knows? Because I will be honest, like some of us, that for some things, I do have an addictive tendency. I think a lot of people do for some things, right? For example, I love video games. Video games could be one of those things that if I had enough time in the day and I wasn't focused on what I need to, could draw me in and so that it might be too much. But alcohol is not one of those things. However, I feel like I see people who do drink to the glory of God. Who drink in a sense, who drink for celebration, who don't go overboard, who actually use that sphere of engaging and relating to other people in ways to bring glory to God, whether it be in their conversation, whether it be in the way that they're able to steward that thing, whatever the case is. And I think but you will have those people who will say, because I can't trust people, I don't see somebody drink out. I can't imagine somebody who drinks alcohol who wouldn't do it to get drunk, right? And I think Romans would be referring to that person as the one who's weak in faith.
Yeah.
So,
and go ahead.
No. And I'm just saying, like, if I was somebody who had a taste bud for alcohol, then I sure wouldn't have a drink around them for their sake, so that they might not stumble and so that we might be in healthy fellowship.
Yeah. And so for me, the whole thing of fighting, like, as I was preparing for this, as soon as I met you and beginning to know you, like, I was like, man, because I kind of go back and forth in this, like, should I watch it? Like, man, is this a good thing for me to watch? I have like 8 months of experience in boxing from high school. No, I stopped boxing because the guy who was running the program passed away, and I just didn't have the desire to go under the new guy who was running the program. So I just stopped boxing altogether. I didn't find a new gym or anything like that. But I've always had a admiration like for boxing and people who fight. My mom's ex-husband, he's a 3rd-degree black belt. So he taught me how to fight in our home and how to defend myself. And so I've always had like just an excitement, and it was definitely entertaining for me, especially with the rise of like MMA. My favorite boxer is Roy Jones Jr. and
let's go.
All these things. And so I was just like,
yep, that'll be for another podcast.
Yeah, that is for another thing. I was like, I love boxing and MMA. And so yeah, Roy's amazing, man. And anybody want to debate me and talk about it, I want all the smoke. So I'm just gonna put that out there. But we'll do that on another episode. So I've always had like a passion and just a desire, and I'm always entertained by it. Like I just went out for my birthday. My friend took me out and we watched the Usman fight, and we were in there going crazy, eating wings, and even we had a drink, and it was amazing. And there was no sin, or I didn't feel any sin. Like I didn't get convicted by it, but it was something as I was preparing, I always thought about it. And the one verse that stood out to me, that helped me in this, and that kind of gave me some wisdom on this topic was it was 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 31. It says, so whatever you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Mm-hmm. And so when you were just explaining your last point, it just summed everything up for me as far as like being able to open the gym and have ministry in this gym and being able to connect other men and being able to share the gospel. Like that's bringing God glory. Mm-hmm. So why would you stop that if it's bringing God glory, if these men are coming to the faith, and then as God leads them and as they grow, they'll have their convictions and the things that they're wrestling with. They're going to be able to say if this is for them as they continue on in their walk or not, depending on what God is telling them. And so, I just found that interesting. I think that's something that we have to stand on and be able to understand that everybody's going to have different convictions, because it was a big thing. Like, I was looking, there's a lot of churches, a lot of people that were speaking out against pastors and MMA. And so my question for you would be, how did you balance, or how did you deal with it as you say you were a pastor for 10 years, as a pastor in a leadership role, leading this church, and you might have had some people in your church, I'm assuming, that even were looking at you like, man, you can't be up here speaking and you're over here, punching people in the face, as you said.
Yeah, that's man, that's big. So I'm gonna come back and touch on a few layers there with the things that you said, because I think it helps inform this answer even a little bit more. So like,
okay,
I think there's something to be said about, well, first of all, culture over the course of history tends to bend in many different ways. And as culture bends, there's like societal culture, and then there's church culture, right? And so sometimes the church bends with society, and sometimes church bends against society in terms of that culture. And the question is never should we be aligned with society or not? The question should really be is, where does God stand, right? It's really important. Where does God stand? Where is God in all this, right? So like, so if society is going to MMA events and there are women with short clothing there holding up ring cards between each, does that mean that I must stand over here in order to in order to love not this world, right? As like we're told in John, right? In order to love not this world. And I would ask the question, well, where would God be, right? Would God
and where's that person's like, if that is an issue, like for them, as far as the women holding up the sign, if it's a lust issue for you, then yeah, you might not want to come to these live events because you're gonna fall into some lust. But yeah,
right. And so I think that's really important to be thinking about, because I've heard things like, how can you do that? It's the modern day gladiator, and I'm just like, okay, I get the comparison. There might be some blood. And I'll speak of the graphic part of it. There might be some blood, there might be cuts. There might even be some screaming and some pride. Bro, gladiators died. It was murder. And it was gladiators were slaves. Like, we're talking about slavery. So like to take something so extreme and compare the two because there's some similarities, what the heck are you talking about? I mean, look, there's the marriage bed and there's porn. There's some similarities, but it's not the same thing, right? It's far from the same thing, right? And so to compare sport, like, bro, when I go to fights and I compete against my opponent, beforehand, we're friends. After the fact, we're friends. We both go to our wife and kids and we bring a check home. You know what I mean? It's vastly different. And a lot of times our friendships, I've grown friendships from having interactions with my opponents. I've shared the gospel with opponents in moments where I've had dinner after the fights have happened, in the moment of our being blessed and been able to build with brothers and sisters and their children, right? So like it's not the same thing, you know what I mean? So it's like they're not the same thing, and I think we just need to be careful of making comparison in culture from time to time and say this is the same thing. It's not the same thing. And then there's the other part of it, which is this: it's like the real God, the true God of the universe, is the greatest artist. He is the artist of art, right? And so, I mean, you're talking about a God who has the most meticulous strokes of the brush and the pen and the paint. And he paints this beautiful picture of somebody who can worship and glorify God, who lives in, the mountains in Colorado. And you have this other beautiful picture, of somebody who's glorifying God in Inglewood, and their lives look very, very different, but they're worshiping and glorifying the same God. And this person over here is probably involved in the inner city and maybe is more sports oriented in the way that he engages, and this person over here is probably much more country and involves much glorifies God in the way that he interacts with nature. But God's painted both of those brushes, not to mention all the different type of situations of people who live across the globe, right? And so in the same way, there's different arenas, and so it's like in the same way that God has given an artist, a musician, the ability to stroke a guitar and somebody can witness the musician and hear the different sounds and glorify God and it causes them to worship God in the beauty of what they've seen. He can also, create another person who can dribble a basketball and jump really, really high heights, and somebody can glorify God for what they see. And in the same way, someone can create somebody who can throw punches and take punches and make someone miss and counter, and somebody can glorify God in what they see. And so this is where I'm just like, look, 9 out of 10 of my friends, I would never suggest competes in boxing. Why? Because for most people, to be in a ring and to know that someone's going to throw punches at you and to feel the pressure of that and weight of that and deal with the stress on the body and all that's involved in there, and to then deal with the pride that rises when you get hit, and then the possible sin at that point you will be in, because then you want to inflict damage to hurt somebody. And that hatred, the scripture says, if you hate anybody, then it's like you've committed murder in your heart. That will be the case for you, but it's not for me, because when I get punched in the face, I laugh. And when I get punched in the face, I smile. And God has gifted me with that in the way that a lot of people, he hasn't. But I'm not the only one. There's plenty of people out there who have been gifted, really gifted, graced by God to be able to kind of endure and adapt and glorify him in that. The violence is defined as the potential for harm, right? A violent father isn't necessarily someone that strikes his kid. A violent father can be somebody who screams at his kid and maybe shows a weapon to his child, like to threaten, like that's violence, right? Mm-hmm. If that's the case, people who work on skyscrapers, have violent jobs. There's more threatening for harm to them than there is for me in a boxing ring. But at the same time, I would never go up on a tall building to work on skyscrapers because I'm not gifted for it. And I would suggest that they don't do the same thing with boxing.
Wow, that's very, very interesting and with perspective. I love that. I love how you.
I'm sorry, I didn't land the plane for you though. Real quick. So all that to say, for me, there were seasons as I was pastoring that I had certain people in my fold who had a really hard time with it. There was a certain point that I laid it down. I laid it down for 8 months, or the people that we were walking with. I wasn't going to lay it down forever, knowing that if I do that, I'm laying it down for them in love because I don't want them to stumble to see a leader doing something that they think is evil. But I did walk with them for a season to teach them what I believe is the whole truth, to teach them the full perspective. And we got to a point to where they understood and re-engaged.
Wow, nice. Appreciate that answer and landing that plane. So how did you transition out of MMA, or have you transitioned out of MMA? And if you have, what did that transition look like, and where are you at now?
Man, bro. So when up into 2007, the hope was a gold medal. I never thought I would go pro because I thought to myself, I don't know that I can do this as a career. I don't know that I can do it as a career in faith. I got to the point where certain opportunities arose. Namely that I was sparring with Stephan Bonner, who's a UFC Hall of Famer, Andrei Arlovski. He is a UFC, he's a former UFC heavyweight champion, the Pitbull. Both of them were training in and around Chicago and asked me to come to a training camp. And in that season, I trained with them, and they're the ones that were kind of like, look, there's a lot of opportunity in MMA. So now when you hear this from two guys that are at the top of the game doing their thing, one of them who's the heavyweight champion of the world, you think to yourself, maybe I should do this. And I trained with a coach and Doug Mango, and now he's in Elgin, who helped me make that transition. That was in 2000. Again, the conversations happened in 2010. The transition fully happened in 2012. And then so from that point on, it was with my co-elders in the church and with my wife and with other close friends who I thought were really valuable. Every step along the way, I consulted with them and kind of asked, does this make sense for me? And so there was consultation, there was prayer, and just kind of hearing from God. And then there were checkpoints along the way. So from 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, it was like at the end of every year, we came back to the drawing board and we're like, what do we need to see to hear from God to know that we should take another step? And from year upon year, there was growth, and there were those checkpoints, and there was the clear kind of, okay, well, you won a couple other fights. What doors are opening? So I'm always asking the question. It's like, look, the scriptures say, 1 Timothy, what I gather is that heresy is speculation over stewardship is a heresy. You can only steward what you have. And so long as I have my health, so long as I have those around me who love me and I believe listen to God and can affirm those things, so long as I, and this is the most important thing, have opportunities in front of me to say yes to, we can keep walking down that path. So I was undefeated for 7 years, and had my baby boy. So my Bellator contract was signed. The fight for Bellator was March 12th, 2014. I'm sorry, March 14, 2014. My son was born March 12th, 2 days before. It was really, really rough kind of doing that thing. For that training camp, I actually married two of my friends the 2 weekends before. I was more concerned in that season about loving the people around me than my fame. And I always just thought, like, look, you steward the relationships you have around you and just trust that the Lord's going to take you where you need to be. I'm not making those as excuses, but that training camp was rough. I lost that fight. And then I lost my next fight. So after going undefeated for 7 years, I lost 2 fights in a row. And at the end of that year, we went back to the drawing board and back to the table. And at that point in my life, 33 years old, these opportunities came off the table. It's not that other opportunities wouldn't arise, but we brought it before the people around me and before the Lord. And we just firmly felt in prayer that this is the time to transition. So in 2014, November 2014 was my last fight. I have talked to my wife since then about taking, because I didn't want to finish my career on a loss, but it's been 8 years now. So I still would love to take one more professional fight, not at such a high stage, but just to get one more in. I don't know if that's in the cards, but I would like to. So since then, I've trained some people, Jarvis Buchanan. I've helped him along the way. I've helped some other fighters along the way. Jarvis is a very similar story, kind of where I'm at. He's a brother walking in the faith, just won his first Golden Gloves a year ago. I co-coached him with Doug Mango, the guy who coached me. So doing some of that, and man, I don't think I'm done in the sphere of mixed martial arts or boxing. Hopefully I'll actually be coaching boxing class in Steinmetz in the coming semester, in order to do everything we've talked about, to bring what we've done and learned and reach people through the art.
Nice. So what are you doing now? Like for a career? Like, I know you're helping out with the boxing. You want to get more into that, but what are you doing as a career wise? Yeah,
man. So right now I'm the program director for a program we call SLAM. And SLAM is a youth outreach program that basically launches what we call Christ-centered life on life between Christian adults and high school youth. And so it's a really high energy program. I mean, it started back in 1999, serving the youth in Cabrini. It started off as a neighborhood ministry, and the Lord just did amazing things. Churches came to partner, adults wanted to connect with youth, and high schoolers, 90% of the youth who are unchurched want to come to a program that talks about Jesus unashamedly. And so it was thriving there for about 18 years before we started to multiply the program. So there's one happening still in the same area near Cabrini. We call that Slam Central. There's one in the Austin neighborhood that we're called Slam West that you're working at. And then, so now, I've had a vision and a heart to reach the folks in my community that I was born and raised in, that I talked about before, in Beaumont Cragen. So we're looking to launch our third in a more of a pilot phase in the Northwest side in Beaumont Cragen at Steinmetz High School.
Nice. Man, bro, we could sit here, we could talk all day. I literally have so many more questions, but I know you got to get to work. I got to get back to work. And so we're going to be continued this conversation in the future, man. I just love your heart. I love your passion. I love who you are as a man of God, man. And, we've had our times to hang out and chop it up. And so we'll be having a lot more of those discussions and those conversations. And man, I'm excited to just be partnering with you in this journey of trying to reach these youth, man, in Chicago. And so love you, man. And
hey, bro, Darry, thank you for the opportunity, bro. Really appreciate you. Hey, and if anybody's listening or watching, we need some mentors for this fall. So
absolutely, we need some mentors.
So yeah, drop a comment and we get you that link.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna have the information in the description. So anybody who's interested in being a mentor, you guys can click on that link, and then it'll take you to the website, and you'll be able to find out more information about GRIP and what we do and what we're trying to do to just spread the gospel to these youth, man, and get them in a life-on-life relationship with Jesus. And so, man, we're going to get up out of here because we got work to do. Thank you guys for joining us today, and until the next one. It's been real. So with perspective. My name is Darry, my boy Erick, and we out of here. Peace.